Hello and welcome. My goal here today is to talk a little bit about the subject of learning. And to do that, I will begin with a little story that happened to me. Once every few years, I travel with my family to go skiing, as I am doing right now. And often I ski with my father, who happens to be much better at it than I am. But one thing that always stuck to me was how his skis always seemed to be so much more stable than mine. And it doesn't matter how much I tried, it seems I could never make them stop wobbling. I tried having tighter boots. I tried brute forcing it by tensioning my leg muscles a lot. I tried thinking about it, but to no avail. No matter how much I tried, it seems they would never stay still. That was until a few days ago when we decided to go skiing with an instructor. And by the end of the day, after a few hours of skiing, he walked up to me and said I had to bend my hips more. If I wanted to do a curve, I had to bend my hips to the side I wanted to go. And if I was going down a steep slope, I had to bend my hips toward the mountain. Because that way, the edge of the ski would have more contact with the snow. And what I had never thought about was that it is not the totality of the ski, but the edge that gives you adherence to the snow. That means that if the edge isn't having enough contact, you can use force however much you want and they won't stay still. And so I did do that. I have been trying to do that the most I can for the past 3 days. And the result is that I feel like I improved my skiing abilities more in these past 3 days than perhaps the last 3 or 4 times we went skiing. And we might have skied around 7 days each of those times. So a lot more improvement in way less time. So, what's the point of all that? Is it that having teachers is a good thing? Not exactly. Having teachers is or tends to be a good thing, but what I'm trying to get at is a little bit deeper than that. There are two phrases that I believe hold a lot of truth in them, which are it's not practice that makes perfect, it's perfect practice that makes perfect. And the other is practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent. Well, what does that mean? We have to think of our minds as a complex system, and every complex system is governed by feedback loops. And when it comes to our minds, or at least the subject of learning, there are two feedback loops which we have to keep in mind. One is a reinforcing feedback loop, where everything that we do is reinforced, and the other is a balancing feedback loop governed by forgetting or forgetfulness. The things we don't do, we tend to forget. They fall out of our awareness. A friend of mine once described this as a canvas where every day and every moment that we have, we are passing the brush over it. The things that we do over and over again, we are strengthening a specific trace in the canvas. And the things that we don't do, they will tend to fade away as new layers of paint are added upon the previous ones. So, back to the system. What does that mean for our learning process? It means that there needs to be a feedback loop through which you become aware of your failings and what can be improved upon the previous attempts. If such a feedback loop is not in place, what will happen is that you will just repeat the same thing over and over. You might expect different results, but you won't get them. At best, you will stay the same at your plateau. At worst, you will get sloppier with time. But does that feedback loop needs to be by the presence of a teacher? Not necessarily. It can be a friend or family member, someone that's doing the thing with you. If you're playing competitive games, your opponent can fulfill that role for you. That's why it's so important to have an opponent that is at least at your level or higher. After all, if he's worse than you, he will not be able to punish your mistakes, your bad habits, and exploit your vulnerabilities. On the other hand, if he is better than you, or if at least he knows tricks and techniques that you don't, he might be able to do so, and that will force you to see what is it that you're doing wrong. Or even making videos. Depending on your recording style, you may want to say something in a way, and then if you don't like it, you try again in a different way and see if it's clearer, if it allows for a more thorough explanation of whatever idea you wanted to convey. Another thing that I had thought worthwhile mentioning here is that in the matter of how much should mistakes happen during practice, there is a very interesting paper published in 2019 that arrived at the conclusion that the optimal path for learning is to attempt things at a level that makes it so that you commit mistakes around 15% of the time and get it right on the other 85%. The idea here is that if you do something that doesn't trigger any mistakes, then there's no feedback. You won't be able to see your flaws, you won't be able to see what needs to be improved. On the other hand, if you attempt something in a way that you'll be making mistakes too often and perhaps not getting it right enough, you may feel a lack of motivation, or the amount of stuff that you need to grasp at once may be too much, and this won't allow you to process everything and thus evolve at optimal speed. So, what matters then are two things. Firstly, that there is some form of feedback loop, preferably an efficient one, so that you can learn as much as possible with each attempt. Secondly, what's also important is that that feedback happens fast as possible. Because if you think about it, that's what will drive exponentiality to do its thing. Time here is the exponent of our equation. And for the purposes of this conversation, time is not measured in days, months, or years. It is measured by how much time there is between each improved upon iteration. That's why when you talk about people who are at the highest levels of whatever it is, they often, in order to practice, try to break whatever it is that they do into smaller pieces and then practice those. So let's use the example of basketball. Let's say you want to improve your technique. What you may do is, instead of just playing the game hours on end with your friends and colleagues, you can try and break the game into smaller things, smaller actions, and practice those. So, for example, you may select a day to practice throwing the ball. You just throw the ball over and over and over. And the difference that that will have in relations to just throwing the ball in the middle of the game is that when you try to do that again, the memory of both your mistakes and the things that you did right will be fresh and clear in your mind. And that will enable your next attempt to be a little bit better than the one before. And sure, maybe the next attempt will go worse, but your awareness of what needs to be done will be better. Your knowledge of how to do it will be better. And so you will be better at it. So, to illustrate the process, we affect the world and in turn learn from the effects of our actions. And so, as you can see, when it comes to our learning process, there are three variables or leverages that we can use to increase our efficiency. In the lower end, you can try and find your own personal difficulty sweet spot. After all, 85% was just the result of a specific research. Each person is different. In the higher end, you can try and optimize how much attention you're paying to what you're doing, whether you're focusing on the right things. If you have other methods of feedback, like for example, a teacher, this can increase your absorption and therefore your progress even further. Then, after all that is considered, there is also the matter of how often this whole process is happening. And you can try to maximize that by breaking the training into smaller parts before putting them back together, or by simply training more often. And that's what I had for today. I hope you all enjoyed what I had to say, and I hope you all enjoyed the view. And I hope I will see you on the next one. Bye.